A podcast of one's own, challenging the status quo, keeping feminist discourse in the limelight, striving for gender equality. So, hello everyone, and welcome back to a podcast of one's own. And I'm joined by Katharina, our new Communications Manager for next semester. Hey.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on the podcast. So, Katharina and I ran the session on gender and film. Katharina was the first member to do a member-run session.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I think that's definitely what gave you the foot up for the exec role.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was so much fun. I had so much fun preparing the session, and I thought that the conversation in the workshop was actually really good. Like, a lot of people had stuff to say about what we presented. So
What made you want to do the session on gender and film?
To be honest, I would have done any session. Like, the body image one would have been interesting as well. And gender and film, I think, I had just, before we did the session, I had just watched a couple of videos that we brought up as well by the Pop Culture Detective. Mm-hmm. And they're really good. I can highly recommend them to anyone who's interested in gender and film. And he pointed out a lot of stuff that had always bothered me about certain movies, but I could never really put my finger on it. Like, I could never tell exactly what was wrong with them, but yeah, he just summarized everything.
Yeah, it was really
well.
good for being able to articulate these things.
Exactly.
Because you're aware of them, but you don't realise that these are tropes that come up in so many different films.
And in all genres, you know, starting from like Disney movies, romantic comedies, fantasy, action movies, superhero movies, everything.
So yeah, we spoke a bit about Disney, and I think Disney is one of the obvious ones. We're all raised with it, and we are aware of how problematic it is.
Which kind of pains me, because I grew up with all the Disney movies and the princess movies, and I love them so much.
I know, me too.
Yeah. It, like, at a certain point, I asked my dad, I was like, why did you let us watch these movies, you know, like, without any context? And he was like, well, you know, they teach you things about, like, friendship, you know, and which is true. Like, it's not all bad, but especially the depiction of the female characters is really problematic.
Yeah, we were looking at images, and a lot of the old Disney classic princesses have waists the same size as their necks.
Oh, yeah.
Which is really surreal. And we looked at this was from Disney Wiki, and they listed the ages of all the Disney princesses. I think that was really disturbing. Like, Snow White was 14.
Yeah.
Jasmine's only 15. And even, like, what's her name, the Rapunzel one?
The one from Tangled.
Tangled, that's it. I was going to say Twisted, and I'm like, no, she's too nice to be Twisted. Yeah, she's only 18.
But to be honest, it says, like, I just saw that it says that Pocahontas is 18. I think the real life Pocahontas was like 12 or something.
Oh, yeah.
When she was, you know, shipped over to England.
Yeah, she was actually kidnapped.
Yeah, and she was a child, you know. And I mean, that's not, like, their age isn't really the problem. The problem is that the sole purpose of their story is having a love interest, or like being rescued from their circumstances by a man, and that's just not age appropriate at all, you know, considering that the audience, like, when did I watch these movies? I was maybe like 8 years old, 10 years old.
Yeah, and I think the thing is that they're built up to be the perfect examples of relationships when you're younger.
Exactly,
to have, like, a fairy tale relationship and live happily ever after, when really so many of them are problematic. Even like the classic ones like Snow White and Sleeping Beauty, where they're sexually assaulted, essentially, where they're both sleeping, lying in bed, and it's okay for a prince to kiss them while they're sleeping. And from a young age, you're taught that consent doesn't matter. Yeah.
Consent doesn't matter, exactly, and that's how a relationship is supposed to be. Yeah, and that your sort of purpose in life is to find a guy. I mean, some of them, especially in the newer movies, they have other interests or, like, other, you know, another purpose. But if you think about Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, Little Mermaid as well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one.
Yeah, Little Mermaid is interesting. It used to be my favorite favorite movie.
Oh, really? How about now? Is it like a guilty pleasure?
I wouldn't say I'm a bad feminist for liking it, but I think Little Mermaid is really interesting because, yes, she gives up her voice. She literally gives up her voice to be with the guy that she's, seen or that she's rescued, and she hasn't even spoken to him once. But as we were talking about before, when I said that, and actually my friend pointed that out to me, he was like, well, she always, wanted to be human even before she'd met him. And she also applies for respect and like stands up to her dad when he destroys all of her stuff, and she's like, well, I want to be human, and you can't stop me from doing that. So yes, she gives up her voice to be with the guy, but then she always wanted to be human even before she met him. So
she still pursues some of her own desires and dreams.
She's still autonomous in some ways.
Yeah, and then they fall in love when she can't speak.
Yeah, yeah. As I just said, the song Kiss the Girl, I really like that song. It's brilliant, but the message is kind of weird because she cannot talk. She can't consent. She cannot give, she's not giving any sign, any verbal sign that she wants to be kissed, and he's encouraged to do it anyways. And we as an audience, we root for them as a couple, Yeah.
And I think that's that leads us on to the point where you root for the male character in the film, because you know the feelings of the women involved. So in Ariel's case, we know that she's madly in love with him, but he has had no way of understanding that verbally from her.
Yeah.
And so you think that it's okay when you're watching the film because you're rooting for him when in reality he has no idea and he's still making moves on her.
Yeah, I think in The Little Mermaid a lot of problematic tropes kind of come together. It's also a story about a girl, like, especially with her voice gone, she comes into his world, She's uneducated, she has the mind of, like, a little child.
And she's seeing everything for the first time.
Exactly, and, I remember the scene when she uses the fork as a comb, and he's telling her, how to behave, he's kind of, like, educating her. So that's a bit problematic as well.
And the trope that we've seen in so many films is the way that's sort of fantasized. So the average male, well, it's called Born Sexy Yesterday, but it's quite difficult to explain, so check out Pop Culture Detective.
Yeah, great video.
Where the male has the opportunity, he's just an average guy, and he has this gorgeous, stunning woman who in reality he'd never have a chance with, for example, and he seems so amazing to her because she's new to this world and he can teach her everything.
Exactly.
And that trope's there.
And it's a really weird depiction of, like, the power dynamics, because it focuses on the male superiority. I mean, he's a prince, but, in a couple of other movies, like The Fifth Element or something, it's mainly an average guy who, swoops in and explains the world to her.
Even, like, completely basic things that she's amazed by.
Yeah, she's amazed by. Telling her how to kiss. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so it sort of suggests either, like, a fear or fragility of, like, female power, because it's such a fantasy that a woman would be just completely stupid and docile. Or you see these tropes in movies where if there is a really powerful female character, she's got one flaw where she's, like, super clumsy and falls all the time.
To make her more relatable, I think, to the audience, because the worst thing a woman can do is own her beauty, isn't it?
It's like, she has to
be...
have this big flaw that men don't find attractive.
Do you remember when Susanna, one of our members who studies film, when she was saying that it's very common for main female characters to be introduced by... the screenwriters with the sentence, the character enters the stage beautiful but doesn't know it.
Oh my
so
god.
that's something when I was like, oh god, obviously, but
but doesn't know it. What's wrong?
What's wrong with owning it? What's wrong with knowing that you're beautiful?
Yeah, it's almost a taboo, really, isn't it?
It is.
And that is a stupid One Direction song as well. You don't know you're beautiful.
What makes you beautiful?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, you don't know you're beautiful, so you obviously need me to tell you, to tell you that you're beautiful and worthy. Yeah, it's weird. I don't know.
How frustrating.
The born sexy yesterday trope. It's kind of, I think it's there because men can sort of escape the humiliation of the rejection by the woman because they're the only men they've ever met or the only person they know. So they have no sexual past or emotional past. They're a blank page pretty much that he can write on, and he can reflect himself on her, and yeah,
you have no chance of getting shot down and shouldn't be intimidated by this beautiful woman. Yeah, it's surreal, isn't it? Get over it, though. And I suppose that ties in with toxic masculinity in film as well.
Yeah.
One that there's intimidation by like female power and fear of rejection, so that women have to be belittled in such a way, and then these male characters like James Bond that we looked at, that are like hyper powerful and strong and forceful, and that's a similar characterization throughout all of the films as well. These men that are
it's true. Like toxic masculinity is an interesting one. It's hard for me as a woman sometimes to understand that, and I actually had to look up the term again to define it, because I know what I'm referring to when I say toxic masculinity, but I found that a lot of men get quite defensive about it because there's this misconception that you're referring to masculinity as toxic, which is not at all what we were saying or what we want. We're just referring to a subset of behaviors that are traditionally associated with man or manhood in our culture and that are harmful or destructive. And as you pointed out, it's defined in opposition to anything that's associated with women in our culture, and it's very much driven by the fear of emasculation, or so being perceived as feminine and therefore unmanly, and that's what makes it so problematic. You have these very gender focused roles,
which then permeates itself throughout society and reinforces these harmful ideals. It ties in with the like the rape culture pyramid that we're looking at, and how it reinforces this in society because it normalizes like acts of sexual violence and things like that are seen within movies are normalized. And
when you have the problem is that not only the bad characters in the movie engage in these sort of behaviors, like violence and humiliation of women, sexual objectification, predatory behavior, just to point out just to give a few examples. Because when the bad guys display that sort of behavior, it's for us as an audience, it's very easy to see that these actions are wrong. But very often the guy who's framed the good guy or the hero would engage in these actions as well. And that's what's so twisted about it. Because we don't see them as problematic then.
And you can still be on their side even though they're being horrific and misogynistic. Like when we were looking at James Bond.
Yes.
And you're like, okay, a lot of them are really old, and we understand that films like this weren't made consciously and that there were different times with different ideas. But then we looked at the last James Bond, Spectre, and I don't know the film very well.
The one with Daniel Craig.
And there's a female character who said that she had been either like brought up in a brothel, or she had been like a sex slave, or been trafficked, and then within an hour he walks in on her, he's naked and he walks in on the shower to sort of like engage in sexual activity with her.
No.
And it's like she didn't consent. And yeah, the video that we looked at is like, okay, well, she's had a traumatic past, she's been abused, she's been raped, better take it easy with this one, Bond. And then he just walks in on her in the shower. So even, I think it came out, 2017 or something?
It's weird.
That even the epitome of maleness is still doing these things.
But just because it's James Bond, you know, this sort of behavior, which is completely inappropriate and in real life could put you into prison, you know, that's framed as like a display of power and manhood and strength, you know, and it's really upsetting. It's not just the old movies that are sexist in a more obvious way, you know, when he says, you know, oh, when he talked to that woman...
you just have to laugh.
And he was like, well, you know, sweetheart, the men are talking, leave now.
And then didn't he not like smack her ass to like send her on her way?
Yeah.
He was like, okay, say hello to the man. And she's like, hello. And he's like, say goodbye. She says goodbye. And he's like, now men talk, go. And that's considered funny.
It's considered funny, exactly. Yeah.
It is. It is funny just because it's so... All you can do is laugh at how surreal it is and how far removed it seems from reality now.
Yeah. But unfortunately, it's not so far removed. Like, sometimes, you know, older men would still make these sort of jokes. I don't know. I can still see it in society. Maybe not in our generation. It's different for us, but... Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I still have like awkward experiences with, you know, when I worked in hospitality with customers who would just catcall you like so casually and they don't even see what's wrong with that. They're just like, well, you know.
Yeah, I had it on the bus last night.
Compliment.
Reading a book I was just reading a book on my way home. And this guy, and I had my headphones on, and this guy like leaned over and was like, "Are you all right?" And I ignored him, and then he was like, "Hello," and I was like, "Hello," and then went back to my book, and he was like, and then leaned right in my face, was like, "You know, you're looking effing gorgeous tonight," and just like the rage, and then he sort of like scoffed that I didn't say thank you.
Yeah.
You know, that I'm supposed to be so pleased that
you're supposed to be so insecure that this like compliment, you know, gives you a sense of like your value.
You have to be grateful for
exactly to be grateful for every
unwarranted advances.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so surreal. Yeah, talking about modern examples, we were looking at Transformers with Megan Fox, and it's such a shame because everyone hates her character when really, yeah, well, like all over Twitter, and you know, people just tore Megan Fox apart for it and said that like Michaela's the name of her character, that Michaela added nothing to the movie, and it's understandable with the way that they framed her, but it's called dissonance of framing we were talking about, and that's when the script is intended to portray something completely different and that's hidden by the framing. And so everyone will remember the scene where she's bent over the car bonnet helping him fix the car. And
see, I've never seen that movie, but so many guys have told me about that scene that I feel like I've actually watched that movie.
Oh really?
That's yeah.
Just from here saying like, oh, did you see Megan Fox bent over the car?
That movie? Oh my god.
Yeah, and she's actually saying how she's really good at fixing cars. She's got a really interesting backstory. She used to help her dad, who she then got a criminal record for, to help him get out of jail time, and he used to fix up broken cars. And she's talking about how men feel emasculated by the fact that she can fix up cars and that they just see her as like a hot body. And while she's saying this, she is just a hot body bent over a car. And even when she's talking, the main character is like biting his knuckle and like putting his head around the other side of the boot to be like, oh my god.
That's right, you showed that in the session. It reminds me of we didn't bring that up, but I think one person in the session mentioned it, like the whole cool girl trope, you know, that got like really popular quite recently. I feel like you see it in movies and TV shows all the time now, when it's basically I think a good example is like Robin from How I Met Your Mother. So she's this like really, like her behavior is very, you know, traditionally masculine. Like she shoots guns and she drinks whiskey and she swears, you know, but she's also this really feminine and like gorgeous woman.
So she can be one of the guys.
So yeah, she's considered from her behavior one of the guys, but you know, they also obviously want to hook up with her.
We're all attracted to her.
So it's pretty much your best mate in the body of a supermodel, and just sets these completely unreasonable standards for women. Yeah, like, you know, in the movie Gone Girl, when she has her long monologue when she drives away in the car, and she was saying that how women are expected to have the most gorgeous body, but, you know, on Friday, Saturday nights, I expected to eat like 3 pizzas with the boyfriend.
Yeah, you still have to be able to keep up.
Exactly, yeah. And it's just,
like, I don't want a girl who just orders a salad when we go for dinner.
Exactly.
I want a girl who can eat an entire burger and this, and you're like, okay, but you still want me to be a size 0.
Exactly, but then you also want a woman who's like tiny.
Yeah, it's all about double standards that are so incongruent with one another. Yeah, so what I was thinking of with the Robin trope as well is that she can be one of the guys, which is considered attractive, and it ties in with this idea that feminine qualities are undesirable.
Are bad, yeah.
Or the whole I'm not like other girls thing. They're like,
yeah, and then internalized misogyny.
That we've spoken about before.
Yeah, you did a podcast on that. Yeah, I listened to that. That was really good.
Why, thanks.
It reminded me a lot about how I used to talk about other girls.
I know, and
I
it's so sad.
Yeah. And I'm glad I was called out on that behavior, because it's really harmful to everyone and to yourself, you know. Like, if that's what you choose, if you want to wear pink or, you know, put lots of makeup on or wear heels, there's nothing wrong with that. If that's what you want to do, you know, if it's not imposed by society or whatever, if that's what you want to do, you should embrace it and not feel sorry for it or ashamed.
So yeah, and the importance of calling out as well. Maybe we both would have been like, I'm nothing like her, unless we had somebody save us. So outreach is important.
Yeah.
So we spoke about rom-coms as well.
Oh yeah,
that old chestnut.
But that actually ties in as well with what we were saying about I'm not like other girls. The rejection of anything that's considered feminine, or, you know how rom-coms are kind of dismissed as chick flicks, you know, and most guys would refuse to even watch these kind of movies
when they're clearly made for men.
Well, yeah, some of them, you know. It's a complicated genre more than you'd expect, because on the one hand, I mean, from like a feminist perspective, it's been criticized a lot, and I can see why, you know. There are a lot of things problematic, because the story often focuses on women who are saved by men or are rescued by the love of a man, which is obviously not the most, you know, most feminist idea. And just I did a little digging when I prepared for the session, and I also found some other things that are a bit problematic with the genre. So, for example, often the female characters are portrayed as being like a little bit too, you know, independent for their own good. Do you remember 10 Things I Hate About You?
Yeah.
Or something? Yeah, the one with Heath Ledger. So, yeah, or how the main characters are mostly white women, and, you know, black women are like the funny best friend or something, or like
or
the
sidekick.
The
angry best friend.
It's very like it's getting a little better, but it's also very heteronormative. And yeah, so there are a lot of things that are wrong with rom-coms, where you could argue, you know, it's not a very feminist genre, but it is a genre that mainly focuses on female characters and portrays them as 3-dimensional characters, and not just, you know, the sex bomb.
And I like to think because of that, a lot of them would pass the Bechdel test.
Yeah, a lot of them do. That's true. A lot of the more serious ones, like, you know, I talked a bit about Dirty Dancing and Pretty Woman, which those are 2 movies that I like them very much. And that's not just because I'm a sucker for romance. It's because the characters featured in the movies are as autonomous as they can be within their restricted circumstances, you know, and they drive the narrative and they make things happen. So you know how in Dirty Dancing, even though she's really, really innocent and really young, I mean, her name is Baby, she stands up to Johnny and her dad, and she even funds the illegal abortion of Pam, the dancing teacher, and takes a place in the competition. So,
I really want to watch it now.
Yeah, it's so good. And in the end, she's no longer Baby. She's called by her name, Frances Houseman. So I think, you know, women like these movies so much because, yeah, we kind of imagine ourselves in their shoes. And not a lot of other genres grant us that, you know, representation.
Yeah, with lead female characters driving the narrative. And there are a lot of conscious ones coming out nowadays, or the introduction of conscious ones, like Lara Croft, the new Tomb Raider, and the Ghostbusters all-female cast.
Didn't we talk about the new Lara Croft as well? That
a lot of people pushed back about the representation of her character.
Exactly, because see, like, I'm not...
Because her boobs weren't as big.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that genre in general, and I've never played the game, but obviously
I'm
I know
a huge fan of the game.
Yeah.
I've completed everyone.
So, and like especially the men, I suppose, who watched the movie or are fans of the genre, they were upset because the actress didn't fit the description of the character in the comic or something, or what was it?
Yeah, in the games, she just had like massive boobs, essentially.
And they gave her a different outfit as well, no? Because when I think of Lara Croft, I think of Angelina Jolie and like her,
tiny shorts, little belly top, the two pistols. Yeah, and then here she's actually wearing practical clothing.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, and they're like, it's unrealistic. But also, that movie is a prequel to all of the games, and the new games have come out as a prequel to the other ones, and then in those games, she's dressed practically. You can choose her outfits. She's more in proportion. And so, yeah, a lot of the fans just didn't like that they were now becoming aware of how problematic the character was.
Yeah, they're being called out for, you know, they're sexist.
So, yeah, with regard to... chick flicks is also one of the genres arguably the most guilty for stalking for love.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this
definitely.
is another trope that we spoke about in the session. And again, without Pop Culture Detective, I wouldn't have been able to articulate it or view it in that way. I think a really good example of a movie that everyone should know is Notebook. And I remember the first time watching Notebook.
Did you cry?
Oh, so hard. I cried for so long.
Really? Because I watched it quite late. I don't know. I mean, it wasn't that I hated the movie or I wasn't engaged, you know, in the story. It was just a story about two people, and I think the saddest part was when that they spent apart, but they found their way back to each other, and you know, in the end they were old and they died. So it was like, why is it so sad?
I cried so hard at, but really? It's like a beautiful. Yeah, maybe spoiler alert, but yeah, when they die, like, she finally remembers them, and then they die at the same time, like, arm in arm, and it's like beautiful, sad tears.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, I do get that.
Yeah, but in the beginning, so how... I don't know the names of the characters, how Ryan Gosling gets the attention of Rachel McAdams is by threatening to kill himself. And, you know, that just went way over my head, and I was like, oh, what are we going to bring up about the Notebook? And he hangs by one hand from the Ferris wheel while she's on a date, and she continuously...
And he pretends to slip. He's like, oh, will you go out with me?
Or I'm going to die.
Yeah, or I'm just going to, you know, let go. And...
Well, she's on a date.
Obviously, she agrees, but that's clearly like emotional blackmailing.
And she's turned him down so many times, and you see that in so many movies.
So many movies, yeah.
Like This Means War with Tom Hardy and Reese Witherspoon and the other dude.
Was that the one where she was like, will you stop stalking me if I agree to go on a date with you?
Essentially, yeah. It's like it's so black and white, and they're both spies, and they're spying on her inner work, and she's like, if you just leave, I'll come on a date with you.
Yeah, they completely disrespect her work and like her personal space and everything.
Yeah, and the reason this is so harmful is because it reinforces the idea that
women want to be won over or want to be chased.
And no means no until it means yes, and that you can wear a woman down until she says yes, which is arguably contributing to the whole blurred lines when it comes to consent for some reason that people don't seem to.
And we see it all the time in reality, you know. That's why it's not just, you can't just say that, oh, well, it's a movie, it's fiction, so it doesn't have anything to do with reality.
And it's how about I experience that every time I go to a nightclub and turn someone down and they don't want to accept it until they find out I'm in a relationship or something like that, you know. Yeah,
this form of, you know, toxic male behavior, it's not because men are biological or inherently, you know, bad people. It's just because if these actions are framed as romantic in movies, obviously you'd adopt them because you think that's what women want. And in the movies, it seems like that is actually what women want.
There's a new movie that's just come out, I think it's on Netflix, called No, it's the opposite. It's What Men Want, actually. Have you seen the old classic What Women Want? Yeah.
I've not made it.
I used to love it when I was younger.
I started watching it and was like, oh, no,
like,
that's
no, this is terrible.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll finally learn what men want.
Yeah.
Let's go check that one out. I thought of another movie. Another one is public displays, like grandiose gestures of
grand
love.
Gestures, yeah.
And 10 Things I Hate About You, with the classic scene where he's singing from the stadium, and the boombox in that old movie. I can't recall, where he goes out to her window.
I always forget the name of that movie, but everyone knows.
I know she quotes it in Easy A, and everyone knows the scene where he stands
outside the window with the boombox. Exactly. And for that example with the boombox, I've never noticed it before, but the pop culture detective pointed out that we as an audience obviously root for the couple because we know that she wants to be with him too, and that the reason why she's ignoring his calls and why she turned him down so many times is because her dad doesn't approve of the relationship. The problem is that he doesn't know that.
Oh, he's only been rejected time and time again.
Exactly. All he knows is that she repeatedly told him, leave me alone, don't call me, I don't want to be with you. And he still does that. He still shows up with the boombox in front of her window and plays the song where they, you know, first made love to. Imagine an ex-boyfriend that you don't want to see anymore
showing up
doing
outside
that.
your bedroom window.
I would probably call the police, to be honest. And in the movie, it's, you know, we're supposed to perceive it as the most romantic thing ever.
And you're put in a situation like with the stadium, and you see it time and time again in so many movies. It's such a popular trope that women want these grand gestures, but you're essentially putting her in a situation where there's other people around, you're in public, you're put in a corner where you feel like you can't say no, and if you do, you're going to be like rebuked by other people that are surrounding you, and you're just going to seem terrible. We were talking about this in my work the other night.
You're just going to seem heartless if you turn him down while he went through all this trouble, you know. Oh, public proposals, that would be the worst thing for me.
That's what we were talking about in my work. Yes, somebody had proposed on a cruise, and you know, you say yes while you're in front of everyone, and as soon as you have a minute to spare, you're like, I can't believe you've done that, you know, where you're forced to say yes.
There are in like a couple of movies or series, you know, the moment when someone proposes in public and then the woman is like, actually, can we talk outside?
Yeah.
It's like one of the most awkward moments I could imagine.
I know,
it's like,
so
oh
horrible.
God, just say yes, just to get out of the situation.
I know, and then the poor guys are like, I thought this is what you wanted. I thought you wanted a big public display of affection, and you're like, no, but you could just ask me and we could talk it out, you know.
Often in movies or in real life, you get into a situation, and you just you would say anything to get out of the situation, you know. And sometimes I think there's a lot of miscommunication between men and women when, you know, a guy would start talking to you or hitting on you, and you just kind of like smile awkwardly to get out of the situation. But then he is told that, oh, if she smiles, that obviously means, you know,
That
she
she's
likes
interested.
it, or she's interested, or she wants that. And so he keeps pushing and pushing, and yeah, at one point it just gets really difficult for you to get out of that situation.
Mm-hmm. And it's difficult. So what's the answer in that situation? You just have to instantly break it down and be like, okay, we need to. If there's like dating handbooks, there needs to be like feminist handbooks on how to how to approach these situations.
That would be another idea for us.
And break it down. Mm-hmm. So what else did we cover? We touched upon the born. We didn't bring up. Did we the born sexy yesterday trope? We did.
Yeah, we did bring it up. We talked about another one, abduction as romance.
Yes.
Yeah, which very much... That, I think the only movies, or the main genre where you actually see that, would probably be like an action movie, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like the Bruce Willis, Jason Statham, or what's his name? Ones where they... What's it called? Transporter,
yeah.
I think, yeah.
And his job is to transport people.
Yeah, the abduction as romance tropes, pretty much the story is about a woman being kidnapped by a man, and then they're falling for each other, or she's falling for him. And yeah, we talked about why that is a display of toxic masculinity, or why it's so problematic, you know. And I think it's pretty obvious, but in these movies, the abduction, or like the control or the isolation that he has over her, it's twisted into an act of romance, you know, because his actions are framed as...
the women fall for their captors.
Yeah, it's framed as reasonable or necessary to in order to save either the woman or the world. And so as an audience, you would forgive him for that, you know, you would... And often, what I found interesting as well, like often a act of like basic human decency,
that's
like,
what I was about
you
to
know,
say.
Giving her some water when she's, you know...
all tied up,
really
gagged,
thirsty, or you know, escorting her to the bathroom without sexually assaulting her. That's framed as like almost an heroic act, you know.
Look how much of a good guy I am, when I could have taken this so much further.
I could have taken advantage
Instead,
of that.
I've just taken away your autonomy.
And it's just so harmful because it reinforces these myths about abuse and like abusive relationships that are actually... that might actually get people to remain in these toxic relationships when, you know, in reality, it's not just one single apology or one single heroic act that gets you to break this vicious cycle of abuse. It takes years of therapy if it can even be broken, you know.
Like the idea that you can fix your abuser, and that maybe just needs time before
the
he
idea
stops
that
engaging in this behavior.
A man just has to find the right woman to fix him, or to
stop
remain
being
with him,
an abuser.
And, stop being an abuser. And we talked about Beauty and the Beast as well, which is probably, I don't want to say it, but it's probably the most problematic movie out of all of the Disney ones. Yeah, because it's just kind of... Also that people sometimes read it as a story... like as the Stockholm Syndrome, you know, where the victim falls in love with the kidnapper. And I don't like that, because it shifts the blame onto the victim and away from the abuser. And that's not what we want, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. It is just so overt, isn't it? Like the Beauty and the Beast case, where he's telling her he can starve and he locks her up, and
either
he's
you
violent
eat with me, or you can starve, or not at all. Yeah.
And we were saying how we were so surprised that Emma Watson ended up playing that role.
Yeah, because she's a feminist. Like,
yeah, and she's very vocal about it.
She's very active. Yeah.
And then
interesting. I mean,
they didn't alter the live action movie. It really stuck to the original.
Yeah, I think she asked for some changes to like the original Disney one in terms of like how she's portrayed, like Belle's portrayed, like she reads a lot, you know, and that sort of thing. Like it's not just like the romance plot or whatever. She's portrayed as an actual person. Yeah. But I don't think
I watched the whole thing.
Yeah. Did you?
No, I don't think so. I'd
like stop watching it because of that.
Yeah, probably. I'm not sure who who played Gaston. But even, when you watch the original, and Gaston is just so horrific.
Yeah,
it is
he
really
is, but
insane.
But to be honest,
and he makes the Beast look better.
Yeah, that's the problem. He makes the Beast actually look like the good guy. Well, he is not. Like, he's a horrible person. He throws her in a cell and lets her starve. It's not what you want either.
You're like, well, Belle, you've got to make a choice.
Gotta make a choice.
You've got a rock or a hard place. You're not allowed to just sit and read books. You have to choose one.
Yeah. I don't know. But, I mean, I don't want to shame Disney too much, because lately I think
we do all know we love Disney deep down.
We do love the movies. And I think lately we've seen some effort to, portray women or, like, young girls in different ways, and I'm especially thinking about Moana, which I absolutely adore.
Frozen.
Yeah, and like I think for Moana, it was the first movie where the heroine she had a purpose. There was no love interest at all. She was. It was
even
like
though
age
there's
appropriate.
another male character in it. I was watching it expecting for the romantic relationship to blossom.
But she was so young, and but it was like age appropriate. She was supposed to be the leader of a tribe, and her mission was to rescue her tribe. And yeah, that was it. There was no
familial love and self-realization and adventure.
Also, that they're trying to portray other cultures than the Western one. I think, I mean, you would have to ask Maori people how they liked the representation. But I think they're making an effort, and it's good. I'm still waiting for a queer character, openly queer character, because
we've seen shorts of it, little excerpts.
There's like in the community there are like rumors that in Frozen, Elsa is supposed to be queer
really?
Or gay. Yeah. But, I mean, it's the same with, like, in Harry Potter when J.K. Rowling, like, in hindsight, she was like, oh, yeah, Dumbledore was gay. And it's like, well, that's probably something.
It wasn't explored at all.
At all. So it doesn't matter. Or, Anthony Goldstein is a Jew. Well, that's great. But, it was never pointed out and shouldn't be treated. It just shouldn't be treated as, like, a thing you could just assume. That doesn't do anything for representation.
So you're trying, Disney. You got to keep on trying.
Yeah. Keep it up, Disney.
Yeah, we also we're running out of time, but we can touch upon the new animation, the Disney style, and how they sort of like infantilized the characters with the huge eyes and the tiny mouths, and they have these baby faces.
Interesting, isn't it?
And the male characters don't have the same.
They look more like real life people as opposed to animated.
So they've shifted from one beauty ideal to another.
The next one,
and whereas it's less sexualized, it's infantilized.
Which is, I mean, I wouldn't find this very problematic because it's more age appropriate. Like
it's
the characters are in fact young. The problematic thing about that is that they still have love interests, and they look like they're 10 years old, and they still, from their behavior, it's like they're 16 or 15 and like exploring their first relationship.
Or even Tangled, where she's 18 and she's just got these huge eyes and the little baby face, and she's never been out in the world before, but again, she is a very strong character in comparison to the old Disneys.
Yeah, no, the new movies are definitely better. With the strong female characters.
So we're moving on up in the world. We're getting there. But yeah, those tropes are really good ones to keep an eye out for. The Born Sexy Yesterday, Abduction is Love, Stalking for Love.
Yeah, those were the main ones.
Dissonance of framing, when the script actually says.
Yeah. Also, if just on a side note, like if people want to look out for feminist movies, I think the Bechdel test is probably a good a good way to assess how feminist a movie is. And
the
it's pretty
Bechdel
simple.
test is...
Yeah, it's like 3 very basic questions. So the first one is, are there female characters in the movie, like more than one? Do they talk to each other? And the third one is about something other than a man. Oh, and the female characters have to be named. Like, it's like waitress 1 or, nurse 2 is not enough. Like, they have to have a name and talk to each other about something other than a man. So that's it sounds like, when you hear that, it sounds a bit ridiculous. Like, well, which movie wouldn't pass that test? But you'd be surprised. Like, actually, I think half of the Harry Potter movies do not pass that test, because even though they feature strong female characters like Hermione, she mainly interacts with Harry and Ron, and she doesn't really talk in a lot of movies to other female characters. So
unless it's about Ron or Harry.
Or Harry, yeah.
So yeah, it's good. I know it's a sort of bittersweet being able to watch movies with this awareness now, and you're like, oh wow, like I've seen the light and there's no going back, and you see it everywhere. And then sometimes you're like, I just want to enjoy a chick flick. But true. Again, awareness, I think this has been a common theme in our other podcasts when it came to music and being a bad feminist or guilty pleasures and engaging in outreach. But
exactly. No one's telling you cannot watch these movies anymore, you cannot enjoy them anymore. But maybe what we can ask you to do is to reflect upon what you're watching and, to distinguish between movies and reality. And even though you might enjoy seeing a grand romantic gesture in a movie, you may not want to do that when you propose to your girlfriend or boyfriend,
Could be a good idea. Well, I think that's a fantastic place to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Thanks, Katharina.
Yeah, it was so much fun.
And a big congratulations to you in your new role.
Oh, well, yeah, big shoes to fill, but I'll do my best.
There we go. That's definitely a good place to wrap it up, Thanks, everyone. Bye.